Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The iDog has landed. It is official, and welcome back. I feel like it's been way too long since we've done a podcast, and I didn't even check to see the specifics, but I would guess it was before the pandemic was the last time you were on, so welcome back.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Bill. It's always a pleasure.
So right now, you have pretty much the best list of Congressional District 1 candidates that's floating around out there. It's this simple, like, I don't even know what it is, some kind of memo app it looks like that you just keep updating, distinct font, and it's floating around Twitter. So who better than to make sense of this Congressional District 1 race than you? We've had some updates this week, but I guess the way to start the conversation is, you know, for anyone who, if you're not aware, Congressman Cicilline announced earlier this year that he's going to be leaving Congress. He's going to take over as the executive director of the Rhode Island Foundation. That's basically increasing his salary by 3. That decision came with a date certain of June 1st in which the congressman would resign, and that triggered a process for a special election that's going to take place really at the standard times that we have elections. So that's kind of the framework. If for some reason, you know, you're not aware of the specifics around that and why there's a congressional race, with that announcement came a flurry of people that were saying they were going to get in, or they were talking to their family, or they're going to think about it. And it just became a little bit of a feeding frenzy at one point. But we've now gotten to a moment where I think the number's 14, if I'm not mistaken, of candidates that are certain to get in or are very likely to get in based on all indications that are reasonable to assess. So your initial thought on just the big picture of this race and how it kind of shakes up Rhode Island politics as a whole.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, based on my list currently has 14 people who have either announced or who are expected to announce. That's a really big field. I've been covering Rhode Island politics for about a quarter century. I don't remember a political campaign with this many people. Of course, this is a function of two things. Number one, congressional openings are very few and far between. You know, Congressman Langevin held his seat for 22 years before announcing he was going to not seek re-election. David Cicilline has been in there for 12 years. It's kind of an odd coincidence that both of these offices are turning over within a year of one another. And on the other hand, a lot of people are getting into this race who are current office holders, since this is an off election year, meaning that someone who is a sitting state rep or state senator or any other elected official can run, and even if they lose, they would retain their current position. So it's a very low risk election for these people. They figure, you know, why not throw my hat in the ring, see what happens. And at the same time, when you have a field of 14 people, there are going to be maybe 2 tiers of candidates: those who have more name recognition, a greater ability to raise money, more organizational capacity, better communication ability. And so I think there'll be a little bit of a shakeout, and it's possible that some of the 14 people who seem to be running right now might not file as of the filing deadline as time moves on.
Yeah, definitely you can expect some consolidation and some allies or allyships that may not necessarily jump out as obvious, but it's you look at the list and you can kind of see, okay, who's going to rise as the front runner and who is likely to be an asset in terms of support. You know, it's interesting. Yesterday I spoke with somebody off record who is a pretty high-level political figure in the state and has run for some serious statewide offices, and he had an interesting take, which is that a lot of people, in his mind, the bigger names, of Rhode Island politics might not get in this year because you have this weird special election. You have 1 million people in the race, and you're just going to have to run again in another year. And that we may actually be in store for a 2-part whammy this year, the special election, and then come, let's say, next December, January, another round of candidates who aren't running in 2023 jump in because they say, okay, now's my shot. The special election's over. The other candidate or the person who won is likely exhausted from the sprint of their special election campaign. And now we're going to get more of a household name type of candidate roster. What's your take on that in terms of the back-to-back years of having to run for this office?
Yeah, that's a good argument, because if someone wins election to Congress, they're usually most vulnerable the first time when they seek re-election. That can be argued both ways, that whoever wins the CD1 seat this year will take on the glow, if you will, of incumbency. And depending on how they do, how effectively they message in the office, that could make them stronger. You know, if they message less strongly or less effectively, they could be more vulnerable. But I think most elected officials would prefer to be running as an incumbent than a challenger. And let's just retrace a couple of the key developments this week. Former state representative Aaron Regenberg got into the race. I think he is certainly going to be in the top tier of candidates. He has already raised more than $150,000. He's got strong communication skills. He's in the progressive lane. He's familiar with issues. He's a true believer on topics like renewable energy. Sabina Matos rolled out her campaign team, the lieutenant governor. Her campaign's being managed by Brexton Isaacs, who managed Governor McKee's successful campaign last year. She has Amy Gabarra, who's a very effective longtime Rhode Island fundraiser, and some other people. And another significant development was Gabe Amo resigning his White House job. Gabe is a Pawtucket native, worked for Sheldon Whitehouse and in the Raimondo administration, has a good story. He's the son of immigrants from Africa, very thoughtful, intelligent guy who has a high-profile job in the Biden White House until he resigned this week. That seems to signal that he is on the cusp of announcing, and he's able to tap seemingly into the Raimondo fundraising network, so he probably will not lack for money. I think another candidate to watch is State Senator Sandra of Pawtucket. She has traditionally been a leading vote getter when she has run for election in Pawtucket, going back to when she was an at-large city councilor. So she has a strong base in the bucket.
All really great stuff right there, and it all makes sense. And I think the big development to come will be Gabe Amo when he likely, we'll say, makes his announcement. I think he's a very compelling candidate, and you can already kind of start to see a Gabe Amo, Sabina Matos, Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos, Aaron Regenberg sort of three-way, I don't want to use the word heavyweight, but that seems to be a possible shakeup. Although I've heard from folks on the ground here in Providence who have said that Sabina has actually lost, the Lieutenant Governor has lost some support in the Providence community, particularly in the Latino community, and that support may be divided into Quezada and Cano, and that may impact Sabina's chances of making any kind of significant run, even though she probably has the highest profile, quote-unquote, name recognition right now in this race. So those are all developments that are really going to be interesting. We're also waiting to see if Don Grebian, mayor of Pawtucket, is going to jump in. You can't help but think that the soccer stadium news that has been, at least in terms of headlines, and even when you dig in a little bit, it hasn't been so positive. And you wonder if that is a reason why the mayor is saying, I have heard that he was expected to jump in a couple of weeks ago, and is now, there's no real update. He did tell Dan York on WPRO that his wife has given him his blessing and he's more in than out. But what does that really mean?
Yeah, a couple of good points there, Bill. It's important to remember the Latino community is not a monolith, and with multiple Latino candidates running, that kind of reflects the maturation of Latino politics. The large field will kind of neuter some of the traditional influences in campaigns because Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos has had traditional support from labor. Sandra Cano has had traditional support from education unions. Maybe the Working Families Party might be inclined to support Aaron Regenberg. So some of the support from interest groups is likely going to be divided among the field, making it more of a free-for-all. You mentioned Don Grebian. I'm not sure which way he's going to go. Certainly there's a constituency of mayors in Rhode Island. There's another Don worth watching. Jamestown businessman Don Carlson has talked about tentatively announcing next week he would be a first-time candidate. I've talked with him on the phone a few times. He seems to have a very congenial personality. You don't know how he would translate, but he seems to have an ability to raise money. He's got good credentials, Harvard Law School. He worked as a legislative director for former Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy II. He's a volunteer EMT in Jamestown, kind of an idiosyncratic collection of credentials. And, we remember how Don Carcieri came out of the woodwork in 2002 to run a very effective campaign for governor. Carlson is a Democrat, Carcieri was a Republican, but I think Carlson bears some watching as a likely candidate.
Absolutely. And you've been all over that scoop, by the way. That's your, that's one that you've been clearly identified, and we're kind of expecting. You've posted that we might get an announcement on the 16th. Is that still something to look for, that Carlson will get in on April 16th?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything contrary to that. He was being careful to say that this was tentative plans. I think he was mindful of the FEC rather. But yeah, I would not be surprised to see him announce on the 16th, which is coming up next week.
Marvin Abney, the House Finance Chair, he got in this week, and it's interesting. Number one, he didn't really do a good job of answering some reporters' questions yesterday at an event in Newport, but that's besides the point. He's going to have to get used to that if he wants to run for Congress. But House Finance Chair, you're managing the budget all the way through June, and then you have a sprint to run for Congress. Do you think it's possible for somebody like a Marvin Abney to both do their job in terms of on a statewide basis right now, even though it's part-time, on a statewide basis, is it possible for him to do his job and run for Congress? And I guess that litmus test could apply to pretty much anyone else who gets into the race that has, because you can make the same argument about Sabina Matos as lieutenant governor. But with Abney, it seems like that's going to be a tough balance.
It is a tough balance, and I think he's very sensitive to that. I talked to him maybe 2 weeks ago because, like other reporters, I knew that he was serious about considering a run, and he expressed to me that he didn't want people to think that anything happening with the state budget is or is not happening because he was looking at or getting into the CD1 race. So that is an issue for him. It's a perceptual thing. And it was kind of funny. His news release came out about 9 o'clock at night, just like it was a very casual thing. I think people who watch this stuff closely, like you and I, expected this, but it was kind of funny, just these campaigns blooming like daffodils in April. But Abney, Newport is a key community in CD1. He has a significant amount of money in his campaign account, and he can't use that for a federal race, but, he could refund it to his contributors, ask them to, effectively recycle it to a federal campaign. So, but yeah, I think the timeline, he is going to be focused on the state budget in May and June. So, as some other candidates are out there making their case to voters. So that is a little bit challenging.
Some of those other candidates include, and, look, Nick Audiello, who was on the podcast here last week, former Raimondo administration official, ran for state senate. Does anybody know who he is enough, even though he's raised some dough? Does he have any standing at this point in this race in your mind?
Well, I think a lot of people that we take as household names in politics in Rhode Island are less widely known than we might think. I mean, Joe Shekarchi, the Speaker of the House, is arguably the most powerful politician in Rhode Island. If we walked around Kennedy Plaza and asked 20 people who he is, there'll probably be quite a few who do not know. So the challenge for someone like Nick Audiello is even greater. Yes, he had a role in the Raimondo administration, but it was not an elective role. He to have any shot at winning, he really has to get his name out there and meet a lot more people and expand his name recognition.
Makita Barnes, former RIPTA bus driver, ran for either state senate or House at one point. I believe that's correct. I'm kind of riffing on that right there, but basically somebody who has no name recognition anywhere except for within her own circle. Yet at the same time, I've heard from a few people in District 1 that said, hey, take a look at Makita Barnes. Make sure you get them on the show. There's some interesting ideas there. There's some interesting reasons to look at someone that is basically an outsider candidate. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm not personally familiar with Makita other than having heard her name and knowing that she's thrown her hat in the ring. Everyone can add to the debate. Everyone has something to say, but the challenge is just really great for an outsider candidate who is not even known within the typical realm of politics. But, I'd be curious to hear what she has to say.
Stephanie Butte is someone who ran for Secretary of State, actually put up a reasonable effort at that point. I ran into Stephanie at an event called Democrats for Kalis. It was in this truck hangar up in Pawtucket or something like that. They were grilling inside. People were smoking cigarettes inside. It was an insane event. It was the one where you expected, is Nick Mattiello going to come out, is a truck going to back up into a loading dock and fireworks are going to go off and Nick Mattiello comes out, or who's the Democrat for Kalis? It ended up being Maddie Smith. It wasn't really a bombshell. Stephanie Butte wasn't on the stage at that event, but she was there. And I wonder if she looks at herself as kind of a anti-establishment candidate, and if that can court some votes and from a more conservative side of the base. If she even, I'm just riffing on this. I haven't talked to her about this, but I wonder if that outsider status is something that she can try to play off of.
Yeah, as you say, she had a very respectable performance in the Secretary of State primary against Greg Amore last year. She got in kind of late and, had a reasonable showing despite that. I'd reached out to her before her announcement because I heard she was going to get in and she was kind of busy and wasn't able to talk to me right then. But I think, something like this can help to raise her profile. She seems like someone with a demonstrated interest in politics, and I think she has an uphill fight in a campaign like this, but it could help to elevate her profile. And, sometimes people have to run multiple times before they're able to break through. And this is a way of her getting out, getting better known, raising her recognition and talking to more voters.
Yeah, you can certainly look at Bruce Sundlun for that on the governor level, no question, in terms of running multiple times before breaking through. Nathan Baya, he's kind of well known within political circles for knocking off Moira Walsh back in 2020. He's a principal, school principal. Does anybody know who he is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, there's probably a fair number of voters in Providence who know him as a representative and a teacher. And he seems like an affable fellow, and he's got a good story, and he's, made his way in the House of Representatives. But I think the challenge with such a large field, I mean, we know that money and name recognition are key factors in politics. And that's why, this representative, I think, he faces a somewhat challenging outlook.
Yeah, it's similar for Stephen Casey out of Woonsocket, and you can kind of make a very similar argument around him. John Gonzalez is someone who is really an up-and-coming political figure in the state, definitely well-known in Providence, does a good job of walking the line between the interests of the progressive side of the party and the business side of the party, and although he's going to get nailed. Somebody's going to say in some debate, hey, you voted or you wanted to defund the police or something like that. Just knowing just speaking with police and other figures in Providence, he's well respected amongst a large constituency. The question is, can that translate district-wide?
Councillor Gonsalves is certainly someone to watch. I think he is a prospective Providence mayoral candidate down the road. People who have been around a long time might remember that a then unknown named Angel Taveras ran in a four-way Democratic primary in CD2 back in 2000. I think he faced an uphill battle at the time, but it was a way of getting his feet wet politically. And, then 10 years later, he ran an effective campaign to become mayor of Providence. So that might offer a little bit of a roadmap for Councillor Gonsalves. And Stephen Casey, again, with this cast of thousands running in CD1, Casey has more of a claim to the conservative Democrat line. The voters in Woonsocket are a little more conservative. He seems more of the pro-gun, anti-abortion rights school of thought. And also he's a firefighter, so there's a constituency of firefighters statewide. He will get some votes, but whether that's enough to get him over the hump, I don't know.
Last of the Democrats, and this I say in air quotes, is Alan Waters. Some people might remember him. He ran for Senate. He ran for Congress. He was a Republican. He was in Massachusetts. Then he comes to Rhode Island. He's got some baggage from a legal standpoint. He was arrested in a moment that apparently he, according to reports, he had a domestic situation. Look, the guy is trying to paint himself as a blue dog Democrat, but 3 weeks ago he was a Republican. Who is this guy? Is he a disruptor? Is he able to get out there and say to the voter in Tiverton that wants, to protect their guns, maybe does Waters have a more effective ability to communicate to that conservative Democrat than anybody else in the field? And can he sneakily get a decent chunk of votes?
You raise a good point in how he, until very recently, was a Republican and has run as a Republican candidate. I think that complicates his appeal in reaching out to Democratic voters. If you're a conservative Democrat in CD1 and your choice is between Stephen Casey and Alan Waters, probably most Democrats would favor someone who has been a Democrat for a longer amount of time. Waters is very active on Twitter. He's in my feed a lot. I don't know if that is the most productive use of his time. He needs to make the case to voters, and that battle is, I'm not ruling out Twitter as an influence, but that the race is not going to be won or lost on Twitter. So, I think he's got a challenge.
Yeah, signs don't vote and tweets don't vote, but like Dan McGowan says, they can't hurt you, that's for sure. I'd rather have more of them than less of them. All right, so kind of last section here, the Republican Party. So Arlene Violet, of course, the former Attorney General and candidate for Senate, a former Republican, perhaps still is a Republican. I'm not sure if she is. She had indicated she may run as an independent. That didn't come to fruition in a statement yesterday. She's basically said her current commitments are going to prohibit her from doing that. So look, the Republican Party, are you going to see Alan Fung jump in last minute? Barbara Ann Fenton Fung. I talked to a couple of people in the Republican Party who have run for major offices, and none of them said that they were going to run this year. Is it safe to say there won't be a Republican? Aaron Gukian, he told me he's not going to run. He of course, who ran for lieutenant governor against Sabina Matos and put up a pretty formidable effort in that 2022, lost track of years here, 2022 race. Republican Party, dead on arrival in CD1, or do you think there's a way that anybody can make a move?
It's challenged. As we know, CD1 is a more Democratic district than CD2. Whether Republicans put forward a candidate is unclear. I think that the absence of such a candidate kind of shows how it's difficult. Arlene Violet could have been an interesting candidate. She would have had a better shot as a Democrat than as an independent. Independent candidates just have a lot of institutional hurdles to overcome. And Arlene's a bit of a folk hero in Rhode Island. I don't think her she is not a spring chicken age-wise, but I think she could have gotten a number of votes. She's very intelligent and good on the issues, but she has decided not to run. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a Republican candidate. Could someone jump in? Certainly, but I think this is a very Democratic district, so it's a tough road to pursue for a Republican.
All right, mile markers that you're looking for. It's only April. This election isn't going to take place until September in terms of the primary. Which, if there's no Republican, that is the election. We're coming right off of Labor Day when that happens. I'm sure we'll have debates in the dog days of summer, like we did last year, where look, people are paying attention, but is it front and center and at the quote unquote kitchen table or whatever? I don't know. It remains to be seen. So, in terms of a timeline going into the summer. When are we going to start to see, in your mind, the front runners separate themselves? Do you have a feeling, an instinct on when that will be? Is it around the filing date? What's your take?
Well, we should certainly watch the filing deadline to see if any of the people who say they're running drop out. That would not be surprising. Other things to watch include the fundraising. As long as candidates get a certain amount of money that's enough to raise their recognition and get their name out, the race does not necessarily go to the person with the most money, but you need a certain amount of money to be competitive. And as you know, in Rhode Island in the summer, it's kind of a dual thing. People like us will be closely following the campaign, but people are a little bit tuned out and have the beach and barbecues and other things on their mind in the summer. One thing to watch is is there an issue that emerges as a key issue? Which candidate or candidates are able to capture the imagination of voters? Is it, going to come down? Are the arguments going to be based on experience and what life story, personal narrative, or is there something in the news that is going to captivate voters and give an edge to a particular candidate or candidates? Those are some of the things that I'll be watching.
Yeah, definitely. Great point right there. It's much like last year with abortion rights when that suddenly became a major, major issue. And you can make an argument that it didn't really impact the outcome of any major vote in Rhode Island single-handedly. At the same time, it definitely drove a lot of the debate and the discussion around most races, to be honest. I mean, really, except for the Secretary of State's race, it came up in just about every debate or interview. Ian Donnis, he is the political reporter for the Publix Radio, Rhode Island's NPR affiliate, and of course you should be subscribed to TGIF, Ian's weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday. It's a great format. Now it features commentary from all kinds of Rhode Island political figures. One question, you kind of answered this in a reply to a tweet yesterday. I saw NPR pulled off of Twitter, and you said that you would not. It is a great news gathering and even distribution platform, and especially in Rhode Island, we kind of have our own little world that we live in, our Rhode Island Twitter. And to be honest, look, if that went away, I was kind of concerned about it going away, because I can't say that the tweet to download ratio is something that is, it's not like the only way people get our information. We both go across our respective airwaves. We both have other platforms that we use, but Twitter is an important one. Your take on NPR pulling off Twitter, and then your own personal decision, as it seems, to stay on.
Yeah, I think, social media is a tool. Like any tool, it has effects that are both good and bad. If you want to find a lot of dreck and stupid stuff on Twitter, you can find it. If you want to find really informed and informative and good information stuff, you can find that too. So it really depends how you use it. I mean, the same with Facebook or any other kind of social media. It's not all good or all bad. There's a mix of it. I was a little surprised personally that NPR made the decision to pull off. Sometimes people use NPR as shorthand for public radio. And, I work for the Publix Radio, which is Rhode Island's NPR member station, kind of the difference between like how CBS is a network and WPRI is the local station. But yeah, I have no plans to leave Twitter as we talk right now, I think it's still a really valuable source for finding out information, learning about breaking news. You can get links to some really long treatments of subjects, whether your interest is music or baseball or politics. You can cultivate a list of people that you follow. And I still find Twitter, even with its flaws, even with the dubious management of Elon Musk, I still find it a valuable information resource. So I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, for about 5 minutes, everybody was like, you got to sign up for Post. It's the new place to be. Or
Mastodon.
Mastodon. I was going to say something about a dinosaur, kind of, Come on, let's be real. Twitter's not going away, and it's just like most of these other. It's odd because Twitter now is suddenly grouped in with like newspapers and radio and TV news, where it's like, oh, that's going to be gone. Like, you better come up with a backup plan. And my instinct is that all of that stuff is just part of an extremely diverse and robust news gathering and information gathering and arguably entertainment serving ecosystem. And new things will come along. It doesn't mean that everything that's old, quote unquote, is going to go away. And that includes, oddly enough, Twitter at this point.
Yeah. And, who knows what the future holds for Twitter, but maybe it'll pass to a different owner who runs it in a different way from Elon Musk. I think there's still value because, as you say, an appealing alternative has not emerged. Even if some people have left Twitter, it's still got a big collection of eyeballs and useful information. So that's a reason to stay there.
All right, iDog, thanks as always for some of the top insight. You're one of the top reporters in this market and a legend of Rhode Island journalism. No question about it.
Very kind, Bill. Thank you so much for having me on.
This episode is brought to you by the University of Rhode Island Online, who are offering a cannabis certificate program. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you're already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in just 2 semesters. Learn more by visiting uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.